right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Beaver, and I serve as the as the Director of Alumni Relations here at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. We're thrilled to welcome you to another edition of Corsair Chats, our virtual event series hosted by our office. This afternoon, I'm delighted to be joined by Erica Sylvia, class of 2015 and 2017 JD. Erica earned her undergraduate degree in history from UMass Dartmouth and her Juris Doctor from UMass Law as a 3+3 student. As a law student, Erica served many roles, including as managing editor of the UMass Law Review, a multi-year Student Bar Association representative, a public interest law fellow, and a teaching and research assistant to several faculty members. She was also published by UCLA's Women's Law Journal. After passing the bar, Erica served for 5 years as an assistant district attorney in the appeals unit of the Bristol County District Attorney's Office, arguing cases before the Appeals Court and Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts. In 2021, she returned to UMass Law as an adjunct professor of legal, academic, and bar skills classes, and today serves as UMass Law's assistant director of bar success, where she works closely with students preparing for bar exams. And today we are excited to have her to talk about artificial intelligence. Erica, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And for all of our participants and attendees, if you have any questions for the presenter, please drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to try and answer as many of them as we can during this afternoon's program. So feel free as they come up to pop them in the Q&A box, and we will get to it as we're able to. So Erica, thanks so much. And would you like to get us started?
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, I am a double alum of UMass. I'm so happy to be back working at the law school. I want to thank all of you for joining me today, whether you're watching live or if you're coming on to watch the recording later. Thank you for being here. So let's just jump right into it. So from an early age, I was always really fascinated by science fiction and technology. But in such a short time span, it seems like science fiction is becoming not so fictitious anymore, right? So as many of you might have noticed or read about or have observed personally, there's been quite a spike in professionals starting to explore the potential uses for artificial intelligence and other new technology in their business practices. So the purpose of my talk today is really to inform and explore the ways that AI, right, or artificial intelligence, or more specifically programs like ChatGPT, have already infiltrated several professions and consider the legal and ethical issues surrounding their use in the workplace. So before we begin looking at applications and implications of using AI, it's worth grappling with what is meant by the term artificial intelligence. It's not a new concept by any means. The term was first coined by American computer scientist John McCarthy in 1956 to denote machines that could think autonomously. We know that scientist Alan Turing is generally credited with the origin of the concept, even though he didn't call it AI, much earlier than the 1950s. His well-known Turing test specified that computers that could complete reasoning puzzles as well as humans could be considered, quote, thinking in an autonomous manner. This really dealt with the question of whether a machine's output could be indistinguishable from that of a human. Again, kind of a real broad definition. The Oxford Dictionary defines artificial intelligence as the capacity of computers or other machines to exhibit or simulate intelligent behavior. But this too seems like quite a broad category of things, right? What was considered artificial intelligence in the 60s and 70s is much different than what it has become today. Because of the widespread use of this term and its exponential growth of the tech itself in the tech industry, it's become quite hard to define AI across the board. Per the Brookings Institution, surveys show that even top business leaders lack a detailed sense of AI, and that many ordinary people confuse it with just high-powered robots or hyper-intelligent devices, right? Obviously, Hollywood doesn't do us any favors, right? When they have these sci-fi depictions of HAL from 2001, A Space Odyssey, right? Skynet from Terminator, or these talking droids from Star Wars, right? But that's not really what we're talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence. The lack of clarity really around the term and its media portrayals enable some technology pessimists to warn that AI is dangerous, right? That it'll take over, it'll take our jobs, it'll make certain industries obsolete, right? But I'm of the thought that really it's just going to enhance different careers, right? Our jobs won't necessarily be obsolete, but they'll be maybe different than what they were some 10 years ago. One such AI program making headlines lately, and the one that's been the focus of my research as of late, is ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT and other generative AI tools have been touted as the ultimate productivity hack, right? ChatGPT can draft articles, emails, social media posts. It can summarize long chunks of text. There really isn't an example that you can possibly think of that hasn't been tried in the ChatGPT or similar apps. It's been making several recent headlines, most of which have to do with the app's ability to, be smart and ace exams, or the app's potential to impact certain professions. So these are just a couple that caught my eye, obviously kind of through a legal lens here, because that's what my focus is. So it's impressive that ChatGPT aced the bar exam in the upper 90th percentile. This article here, how will generative AI impact legal departments, right? How is it going to shift the practice of law? Other articles say how it passed AP biology exams, different medical boards. And some fear that knowledge-based jobs could be the most at risk from this AI boom. So really, what is ChatGPT, right? If you've heard it, if you've seen headlines, ChatGPT is software that was launched free to the general public on November 30th of 2022. It was developed by the tech company OpenAI. ChatGPT is probably the most recognizable AI tool at the moment, apart from other AI tools that generate art. ChatGPT differs because it's a chatbot, right? So it's used for conversation. The application uses the generative pre-trained transformer, hence the GPT, right? Which is really just a large language model that uses deep learning to produce a human-like text response to a given input. So in its simplest form, right, we can kind of compare it to a very sophisticated version of like the autocomplete feature on your phone when you text someone and it guesses the next word. What ChatGPT is doing is, based on all the text that's been fed and what your inquiry is, it's guessing the next best word to answer your question or complete the prompt that you've put in. So really its primary function is just to respond to that input. It can be used for a wide variety of applications, including legal research, document generation, right? The main thing here is that it spits out text instantly. Now, per OpenAI themselves, right, ChatGPT, quote, interacts in a conversational way. The dialogue format makes it possible for ChatGPT to answer follow-up questions, admit its mistakes, challenge incorrect premises, and reject inappropriate requests, right? So once you start a conversation with ChatGPT, that it will remember the previous questions you've put in, and it will adapt to what it thinks best fits your inquiry. Importantly, right, this content is produced in a moment's notice, right? This impressive nature has quickly become a social media sensation. So I'm sure maybe if you haven't read articles about it, you've seen it maybe through Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, right? Why? Because you can really ask it anything with little limitation. You don't necessarily have to just use it for research, right? It can come up with jokes, it can suggest recipes, it can create a meal plan, it can proofread your documents, it can help debug code, right? It can really, the limits are endless here. It can provide book reports, quick summaries, right? There's very little limitation. Now, as a law professor and someone who's fascinated by this technology, right, I know my students and plenty of other students know it exists and are using it, right? That's just the day and age that we live in right now. Funnily enough, right, I was probably in June or so of this year, I was out to breakfast with my children, and the table on the side of us had a family, presumably mom and dad and two teenage kids. And the father asked the son, this is back in June, so school year's wrapping up, if he had any homework or projects left before the end of the school year. And the son replied, yeah, I got a couple of papers I need to write, but I can do them really quickly. And the father said, quickly, what do you mean? And the daughter explained that her brother was using ChatGPT to write his papers instantly. So the professor in me was like, oh no, but this is just the reality, right? It's in our computers, right? It's at the touch of a button, right? So if you think about ChatGPT's ability to gather, analyze, and summarize lots of data instantly, it's a huge head start to any type of project. It has the ability to, if not already, revolutionize industry as we know it, right? Why? Because it can handle administrative tasks and create jumping off points for projects in mere seconds, right? Something that might have taken a junior legal associate 3 to 5 days to do, they can do it with the help of ChatGPT in a day. It's making workers the most efficient versions of themselves, so long as the prompts that are being entered are appropriate and specific. Now, employees began embracing this technology, sometimes even without the knowledge or consent of their employers. Business Insider reported that back in January, so only a mere 2 months after this tech was released, that 2/3 of ChatGPT users that were surveyed said they were using the technology on the sly, right? So without their employer's knowledge or consent. In one study, AI made computer programmers 56% faster at coding, right? Which is great, right? Time is money, and you can get through those projects. In another survey, employees completing writing tasks said they were 37% faster when they were assisted by AI. Now, super efficient workers, right? As a boss or a supervisor, what's not to love? Except not all CEOs have embraced this technology. Indeed, several companies have issued blanket bans to their employees about using ChatGPT in the workplace, right? And why is that? Because it's risky, right? New technology, it's risky. So what are just some of the risks, right, that you and your employers should consider when thinking about whether ChatGPT is appropriate to be used in the workplace, regardless of your field? Now, the first one that we see come up a lot is data privacy. And data privacy can really kind of fall into two types of data. So let's talk about them one by one. Now, according to the OpenAI product and service privacy policy, so their terms of use, right, that you need to click through in order to set up your account and use the product, when a user makes use of the provided tools, the provider, OpenAI, obtains user information. This is what they're calling personal data. This includes your IP address, your location, your browser type, the date and time that you start using ChatGPT, the length of your session, right? It pretty much obtains all of that metadata from your device, okay? This, they tell us, can be used in a number of ways, right? Some of them positive, right? Including to maintain, upgrade, and analyze the products. Now, ChatGPT, right, learns based off of language. So every time a user is using the product, it is learning from that experience. However, the data can also be disclosed to third parties, and it's important to think about this when we are using products like this. It can be disclosed to third parties either lawfully or unlawfully. Now, what do I mean by that? Obviously, by agreeing to the terms of service, you're agreeing for this company to collect and potentially distribute or sell your information to third parties, right? A lot of tech websites, social media, things like that do this, right? So it's not an uncommon practice, but you should also be aware that once your data is out there, it could be subject to unforeseeable software hacks or attacks, right? So anything you kind of put out there is out there, right? You can't take it back. So we should just have that in the back of our mind. Now, input data is another type of data that ChatGPT and other similar tech, they're going to collect from you. Now, ChatGPT is a great resource for proofreading, right? Checking content, checking computer code. But you need to remember that if you're using something like this and based on the terms of service, right, you're agreeing to have them record and store transcripts of all of your conversations, okay? Now, this means that anything you put into the chat, personal information, business secrets, sensitive information, privileged information, right? It's going to be logged and stored on a server. Now, you've maybe seen some reports, right? Several Samsung employees recently used ChatGPT to debug their code, right? We know it makes coders more efficient. However, in doing so, they inadvertently revealed trade secrets, right? They had Samsung source code and they just dumped it right in to ChatGPT, right? It's no longer private information. So if we're using ChatGPT or similar tech in the workplace, right, we need to be careful in what we disclose in terms of private details or business secrets, right? It's easy to kind of fall into the trap of accidentally releasing this information if we're just full on copying and pasting a document we had written for some kind of feedback. So if you're using ChatGPT for business, right, to analyze any kind of input, right, if you put confidential information in there, not only is it just a safety issue, right, but you could be breaching contractual obligations that you have with some kind of contractor. You could be divulging trade secrets. You could be violating laws like HIPAA or FERPA, depending on your industry, right? So we just need to be careful. I read recently in a recent interview with Mashable, Privacy Research Vice President at Gartner, Nader Heinen. He advised individuals to think about ChatGPT as an affable stranger sitting behind you on the bus, recording you with a camera phone. Now, that's a little bit loaded, but what he means and what he said he meant by that analogy, right, is that ChatGPT seems like an unassuming person, if you will, right? Someone that you're talking to. But you just need to be mindful that really everything is being recorded. Everything you do, everything you put in is being recorded. So business owners, managers, supervisors, right, you should consider whether and to what extent tools like ChatGPT can or should be used by your staff or by contractors, right? We want to make sure that we're keeping those confidential pieces of information confidential, right? And you're not waiving any of your privacy by putting them into this machine. Now, the second kind of big legal issue that often arises when discussing this type of technology deals with intellectual property and copyright issues. Really, under this umbrella, you typically see three types of recurring topics of discussion. The first deals with the copyright infringement of third parties' intellectual property. The second deals with the copyright status of the content that's generated by the tool. And the third usually deals with the right to use that generated content. So let's talk about the first one, the infringement of third parties' rights. Now, using AI-driven applications that have been trained essentially by scraping as much text off the internet as possible may result in unintentional infringement of intellectual property rights, right? Why? Because the generated content can easily resemble and be based upon existing content in which third parties have copyright rights. So it can result in accusations of plagiarism, copyright infringement. Say, for example, I asked ChatGPT to summarize a chapter of Harry Potter, right? It very well could dump out a large portion of text that is a verbatim copy of a chapter from Harry Potter, right? And it may do so without proper attribution or copyright information. And often it will not have copyright information. So we just need to be careful with the resulting text we get that it could be copyrighted intellectual property of another. So because there's this tendency so far in this short span of time, there's many pending lawsuits that deal with these types of IP claims, right? This here is an article about Sarah Silverman. This is just one of the many lawsuits playing out right now on the issue of copyright. Silverman's accusing OpenAI of copying her work without consent and without credit and without compensation, right? And in attachments to her court filing, she shows that when ChatGPT is asked to summarize her memoir, it produces accurate summaries as well as full passages lifted verbatim without any kind of attribution or copyright information. So this is just one example of several lawsuits happening right now that's just copying, plagiarizing, lifting verbatim text from existing copyrighted works. The next question that usually surrounds this type of technology is, can the AI generated content, right, can that output be copyrighted? The answer here, probably not, right? Again, qualifying that with a probably, so probably not, right? One essential criteria for copyrighted work in the United States is that it's the product of human creation. So recently, the Copyright Office in the United States ruled on whether a picture generated completely autonomously by AI could be validly registered, and it stated no, right? It doesn't meet that human authorship requirement under our law. Now, some individuals write articles and say, no, AI generated content should definitely be copyrighted under the current framework. And they claim that ultimately the creator of everything here is a human. But really what we see from the Copyright Office, right, and the trends right now, it's not looking like, at least in the United States, that the output can be copyrighted at this time. But it is kind of noteworthy to compare with other jurisdictions. For example, the United Kingdom has copyright laws that have a provision that deals specifically with computer-generated works. Now, therefore, if you're using this type of technology in the UK, the generated content may be protected so long as the individual who put in the prompt, right, performs what they call the essential actions to create the computer-generated content, right? So it's could be different in every country, could be different in a bunch of different jurisdictions, right? Where this is a highly unregulated area of technology, right? It's kind of hard right now to fit this, who could have thunk version of technology into these kind of narrow existing legal frameworks. So that's why there's a lot of lawsuits going on right now, and hopefully maybe soon we'll have some clarity from the courts. And then lastly, if, right, in a hypothetical world, if that output is copyrighted, who then is the holder of that copyright, right? Who gets the protections? Is it you, the end user? Is it the corporation who holds the software? So what I'll say to that, right, is to look to your jurisdiction's law and look to the terms of service that you've agreed to. If you are already a ChatGPT user and you signed and clicked yes, yes, yes to all the terms of service, right? OpenAI, for example, has transferred all the rights to its generated content to you, the user. They're waiving all of their liability. They say, quote, OpenAI hereby assigns to you all its right, title, and interest in and to the output, right? This is a company, a large, expensive company that's seemingly looking to just waive and disclaim all their potential liability for its generated content, right? So we just need to keep that in mind, right? And be aware that if what we're generating is already copywritten or can be copywritten, that it might implicate you, the end user. Now, one of the last risks I'll talk about today, and one of the biggest, right, has to do with AI's tendency to make mistakes, exhibit biases, and just flat out give entirely fake responses, right? So let's talk about that. Now, ChatGPT, right, their generated content may not always be correct or accurate. It may, what individuals in the field call, hallucinate, right? So why is that? Because ChatGPT doesn't actually think the way our brains think. Rather, it works by predicting strings of words that it thinks best matches your query, right? So there's obvious limitations here. It lacks the reasoning to apply logic or consider any factual inconsistencies in the answer that it's spitting out. It doesn't know the difference between true and false. It gives the same weight to academic papers that it's been fed as it does to fictional stories, right? So that can be a little bit damning here. ChatGPT very well could combine sources and combine claims to come up with a response to your question that's just plain factually inaccurate. So additionally, another limitation that this tech has is that it's only trained through a date certain. For example, ChatGPT is current only up until 2021. So if we're asking it to talk about something that happened in 2022 or 2023, it very well just could create its own narrative because it does not know past a date certain. So because we know this, because we know that it can create fake answers and fake news, right? We see things like this happening. The story here reported by Reuters, you might have seen it. The New York lawyer sanctioned for using fake ChatGPT cases in a legal brief. Now, this lawyer did exactly what I'm telling you today not to do, right? They asked ChatGPT to write a legal brief on these legal issues, and they took it wholesale and they filed it with the court in New York. Now, the brief itself from ChatGPT, right, it looked great. It cited to a lot of legal authority, you know, in their favor. The only problem is that the lawyer failed to check the supposed authorities, and all of them were fake. They were made up by ChatGPT. They were not real cases. They were not real holdings. But because the lawyer did not check, right, did not do his due diligence here, he just relied upon a wholly fake an inaccurate piece of information from ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT, especially the free version available to the public, right, it's often wrong. Will it get better over time? Maybe, right, because it's still learning every day. Every person it interacts with, it's becoming more and more informed. The updated version, right, GPT-4, which is only available by subscription right now, and people are on wait lists for that, is allegedly a much better version in terms of accuracy. However, it's still not perfect, okay? It's not a perfect system. So, knowing what we know, right? We know that AI is largely unregulated right now. So lawsuits are rampant, right? Different countries are having different responses in terms of how to handle this technology boom. I know countries like Italy, I believe, are investigating, you know, how to handle it. They have their own kind of AI task force. You might have seen that the White House issued recently kind of a blueprint, they're calling it, on AI best practices and what software companies should do and how they should handle certain things. But as the consumer, right, what do we need to do, right? The proverbial technology train is leaving the station, right? And we can't stop it. So if we're choosing to embrace this type of technology, whether you're doing it personally or in your business or both, you should do so in a way that's intentional and informed, right? You should have all of, you know, the risks in mind before you move forward. So today I hope to kind of leave you with some better practices, not necessarily best practices, because there's so many things we don't still know about this type of tech, but better practices of things to kind of keep in mind when using these tools. So first, privileged or confidential information, right, should never be input. When I use ChatGPT, right, I've used it, and I'll explain kind of the ways I've used it. So one example is I've had prior colleagues or friends or former students ask me for a reference letter, right, or a letter of recommendation. So how might I use ChatGPT to help with that? What I did, right, is I told ChatGPT, you're a law professor, and you need to write a letter of recommendation for a former colleague. Please give a template, you know, in a letter of recommendation form. And out would pop something very generic, right? Again, not giving it any confidential information, not giving it any private information of an individual, but at the end you get a nice kind of template jumping off point where you can then fill in, edit, and use that product without adopting it in its entirety, right? So be careful if you're going to use it to kind of withhold that privileged information. We should remember that generated content may implicate or infringe the rights of another, right? So again, don't take that output and use it wholesale, right? Because you might be plagiarizing or accused of using someone else's work. Again, right, we know from that New York lawyer, right, and maybe you've experienced this in the past, right, generated content is not always correct, so never rely upon it wholesale. Never let technology like this be the pilot, right? If you're going to use it, you should be the pilot. This can be the co-pilot, and you should always be, you're always going to be the one responsible for whatever kind of deliverable you make at the end of the day, right? You can't place blame on a machine for what you decide to draft, submit, or anything like that. So it's important to adopt appropriate workplace policies, right? Or consult with your supervisor about any kind of limitations if you are going to use this, right? We know that people are using it on the sly, right? They admitted to it in surveys, but you don't want to lose your job for stepping outside of the bounds of what's allowed in your particular career. So just be careful. However, I do want to leave you with this, right? We know that AI is truly an amazing tool, but it's not without risks. So please, 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 if you're going to use it safely, use it appropriately, be informed, and just kind of have fun with it, really, because it's not going away. So I hope to kind of leave you with that piece of advice. I know we might have some questions in the chat, so I'd be happy to kind of answer those if I can at this time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Erica. So our first question comes from Castell. Do you also serve on the UMass Law Alumni Association Board of Directors?
Hi, Castell. Thank you for joining me today. And yes, I do. I happily serve on the UMass Alumni Board of Directors. It's very fun. We're out there. So if you see us, right, say hello.
Great. And then also from Castell, do you think AI courses will be offered in law schools, graduate and undergraduate schools as part of ethical awareness?
I do. And I know a couple colleagues at other New England-based law schools have started implementing this type of tech in their legal writing classes. Why? Because right, we know our students are using it, so we might as well teach them how to use it safely, ethically, and responsibly, right? If we give them an assignment and, tell them they can put it in ChatGPT and then maybe have them evaluate, the accuracy, right? Here's why you shouldn't rely upon it wholesale, right? Any kind of teaching moment. I think it's not the best practice to kind of flat out kind of ban or deny its existence, right? Because it's just part of everyday practice, right? So if our students are graduating, not just in the law field, but in any field really, and they're going out into the, into the workforce here, they may very well be expected to know how to use this technology, right? It might be part of the job in 5 years time from now when people are graduating. So I do think it's important to start integrating either the use of ChatGPT or policies on best practices, right? I think we need to start including language in, syllabi, for example, in terms of, if you are using it, then this, or a complete ban, right, dependent on the class. But I do think it's going to change not only the workplace, but education, definitely, for sure.
Great. Our next question comes from Debbie. Can you please provide some examples of a responsible use of AI?
Yeah, so I mean, you can really use AI, it's kind of limitless here, right? So I would say, like for me, for example, I use it sometimes in a professional capacity in terms of looking for templates for letters of recommendation. I use it to kind of help structure my syllabus, right? Rewrite certain portions to make it either less formal or more readable or just proofread, right? But I'm always making sure to withhold any kind of privileged, confidential, or identifiable information, right? I also would advise you, right, if you don't have the green light to use it in the workplace, don't sign up for an account using your workplace email, right? Use your personal email for that. You can use it personally but again, the uses, right, are really limitless here. I know my children like to use it. They ask ChatGPT to come up with trivia questions, and they like to ask each other questions for long road trips. So that's kind of a fun use. I've used it for recipes. But again, you can, the options are endless here. It's just we want to make sure that we're not kind of divulging anything that would, put your company at risk or put yourself in jeopardy.
Great. And again, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to pop them in that Q&A box down at the bottom there. And I just had a question in my mind and I just lost for a minute there. Thinking back to some of the examples that you were giving, for example, that family using ChatGPT for assignments and everything like that. Do you think that eventually faculty or teachers will be able to start distinguishing a ChatGPT written essay, brief, whatever, from one written by an actual human?
Yeah, so what's funny is there's kind of several schools of thought kind of happening amongst my colleagues and colleagues across the country. So a lot of them say, listen, a student can use ChatGPT all they want. I don't care because I'll be able to tell the difference, right? Or they joke that the one written by AI is more professional and better written, so it's easier to spot than that of a student. There's also this call for kind of plagiarism detectors, right? Or AI detectors. The only problem is if someone's trying to sell you an AI detector, I can tell you right now, they don't work very well. Why? Because ChatGPT just varies the word, right? So it might not be a string of necessarily plagiarized information, or it might be a lot of plagiarized information from several different sources, right? So it's not very easy to tell if something's lifted. A lot of times the professors just say, I know Johnny's writing, and that doesn't look like Johnny's writing, right? So it's kind of all just intuition based right now, which is not necessarily a good policy to have either. But a lot of faculty currently say that, you know, they need to kind of alter up the types of assignments they're giving, right? Less take-home exams, less kind of take-home essays and things like that, or papers, more in-class instruction, right? If we're trying to stay away from it for education purposes, the push by some faculty is just, we're doing all in-class work, we're not allowed to use it in the classroom. So that's kind of one school of thought. But yeah, I definitely think it's going to, if not already, change education in kind of these unforeseeable ways that we didn't expect or anticipate some year or two ago. So yeah, might change the way some teachers have been teaching for quite some time.
Sure. And just out of curiosity and a fun one, what state bar exam did ChatGPT
So it took the uniform bar exam,
okay.
right? Which is the one that's administered in 40 plus jurisdictions right now. And the funny thing is ChatGPT 3, right? GPT-3 took the exam and did not pass, but then ChatGPT 4 took it and they aced it within a few points, right? So they're very clear. OpenAI is very clear about their data. And if you go on their website, you can kind of see, here's all the tests and questions and things we pumped into it, and here's how it performed. And it performed scarily well on several standardized tests across several subject matters. So it really is an impressive tool. I just think we need to be mindful, regardless of what career or profession we're in terms of, you know, we're still the ones who kind of has to fall on our own sword for the things we put out, right? So like the New York lawyer, right? He's the one whose name was on that brief, right? It wasn't submitted by ChatGPT, it was submitted by so-and-so Esquire, right? So at the end of the day, it's going to be you who's responsible for the usage of ChatGPT and not the program itself. So
when you were talking about the limitations of it just being current with information through 2021, I think I remember hearing a story of on one of the tech podcasts that I've been listening to about ChatGPT, of how they asked it who the reigning monarch of the United Kingdom was, and this was after the Queen had passed, and it was still saying that Queen Elizabeth was the monarch, the reigning currently. So just another one of those limitations kind of things there. So
for sure.
And I think that it looks like we don't have any more questions. So we'll go ahead and start wrapping up. But thank you so much, Erica, for your incredible presentation. I know I learned so much out of it. We appreciate your expertise there. So, and audience, thank you again for joining us. Again, like we mentioned this, if you have questions or have, well, actually we got one more. So ChatGPT, this comes from Michael, another Michael here. ChatGPT is available from OpenAI. Can you share more on the other ChatGPT alternatives available?
Yeah, so there's actually a wide array of chatbot-based AI tools out there. Some are built upon the GPT generative pre-trained transformer. So there's versions of apps that are specific to certain types of careers that are built upon the GPT technology. For example, just off the top of my head, there's one in the legal industry called Co-Counsel. So what that is that's GPT, and on top of it, they stacked databases of real legal cases, right? So again, you won't fall into the trap of using fake cases, because if you are a subscriber to Co-Counsel, it can write the brief with real cases for you. So there's those types of alternatives, but there's also other free alternatives like Google's Bard. There's Bing's chatbot. I think it might be called Sydney. But again, all of these kind of share the same types of risks, right? Google, a lot of scathing headlines came out about Bard just being plain inaccurate during Google's presentation of Bard, I believe, where they were touting that it's such a great product, so accurate. The answer that it spit out was false in that moment. So not a good look for Google. I know there's other headlines in terms of a chatbot professing its love for the user, right? So we just need to be careful across the board. These kind of risks kind of ring true across any of these chatbot tools that you could be using right now. But there are probably hundreds right now, given this boom, that all claim to do, a specific task, whether it be write out text like chatbots do. It could be creating art like Midjourney or Dolly, where you ask it, give me a picture of a forest that has a dragon in it, and out will pop, a picture that meets your requirements instantly, right? So there's all of these different types of things and different AI tools for different uses. I know there's a couple that deal with Excel spreadsheets, right? You can kind of attach an AI tool to your Excel program, and it can help you with your formulas and make things cleaner and neater. So it's really kind of infiltrating a lot of different areas and a lot of different tools. And, as we see, I think Microsoft acquired AI tools that is now building upon PowerPoint, right? So these types of things are being made available to the general public, which I think is helpful. They're being made available to students too, to help kind of improve their, projects and things like that. But there are a wide array of tools kind of at our fingertips right now, and I think we just need to be careful and intentional about the way that we're using them.
Great. So audience, again, thank you for joining us. We've got some exciting virtual and in-person events coming up, including some more Corsair chats in our series, including on one of our alumnus's time in the FBI, as well as a service event at the South Dartmouth YMCA on September the 10th. And also don't forget that we have Blue and Gold Weekend coming up on the first weekend in October. Information can be found on our website at umassd.edu/alumni. And we hope that you'll also follow us on social media to stay connected to exciting news and events that are coming up. So that's at UMassD_alumni on Twitter, which I guess now is actually X, at UMassD alumni on Instagram, and also finding us at UMass Dartmouth alumni on Facebook. We also have a UMass Dartmouth alumni group on LinkedIn as well, so make sure to request to join that one as well. So thank you, everybody. And for those of you here on the south coast of Massachusetts, hopefully you are staying dry with the rain that we had going through this morning. And thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon.